When the HOA president secretly moved into my abandoned mountain cabin. I never imagined the shocking truth I was about to uncover. What happens when authority goes too far? Watch to find out. The mountain cabin had always been a place of mystery, tucked away in a remote part of the forest, far from the main roads and the hustle of civilization. I had inherited the property years ago from a distant relative who had lived there in solitude. But after their passing, the cabin was abandoned. It became little more than a relic of the past. With time slowly taking its toll, nature had begun to reclaim the land around it. With tall grass and thick vines creeping up against the weathered wooden walls, the once charming porch, now sagging and cracked, bore the scars of years of neglect. For a long time, I barely thought about the cabin. It was just there, forgotten, just like the family members who had built it. But one evening, I felt compelled to visit. Something about the old place called to me. The long, twisting road leading up to it felt eerie in the fading light, the shadows of the trees stretching across the narrow path. As I drove closer, the sight of the cabin brought back memories I hadn't thought about in years. The rusty old truck parked nearby, its tires deflated and windows dusty, added to the sense of abandonment. The cabin stood as a silent witness to the passing of time, its doors and windows closed, as if holding onto its secrets. I parked near the porch and stepped out into the stillness of the forest. The air smelled of pine and damp earth, and I could hear nothing but the occasional rustle of leaves in the wind. The path that led up to the cabin was overgrown, the stones half buried in thick grass. Yet I walked it. It was a typical afternoon when I first stumbled upon the shocking discovery. Though at the time, I couldn't have anticipated how much it would alter the course of everything. I had gone to the cabin, expecting it to be just as I remembered, empty, silent, and untouched by time. But as I approached the porch, a strange sensation settled in my chest, a mix of curiosity and unease. At first, I thought I saw movement through the dusty windows, but I brushed it off as nothing more than a trick of the light. When I entered the cabin, the air inside was thick with dust, and the once familiar scent of pine and wood was now replaced by the musty odor of neglect. Yet, it wasn't the state of the cabin that struck me most. It was the sound of footsteps coming from the back of the house. My heart raced as I moved cautiously toward the noise, the echoes of my own footsteps seeming unnaturally loud in the stillness. I reached the back door, only to find it slightly ajar. My hand trembled as I pushed it open, revealing a sight I never could have prepared for. There, standing in the dim light of the overgrown garden, was the HOA president, someone I thought I would never see in this isolated place. He was hunched over, working on something near the porch, oblivious to my presence. The sight was jarring. How could he be here? What was he doing on my property, especially after years of it being abandoned? His casual posture, completely unaware of the intrusion he had become, only made the discovery feel more surreal. At that moment, I was struck not only by his unexpected appearance but by the overwhelming feeling of betrayal. The HOA president had been a figure of authority in the neighborhood, always giving the impression of righteousness and responsibility. The irony of finding him trespassing, uninvited in the very house that had been left behind, seemed almost too much to believe. He didn't belong here, and yet there he was, in my family's abandoned cabin, as if it were his own. The questions began to flood my mind. What had brought him to this secluded spot? And why had he chosen to live in a place that had been so long forgotten? These questions simmered beneath the surface as I stood there, frozen by the discovery that something much more complex than I had realized was unfolding before me. As the realization sank in, I knew I had to confront him. I had to understand why the HOA president, a figure of authority in our community, was trespassing in a place that should have been off limits. The tension in the air was thick, and my heart pounded in my chest as I stepped closer. With each footstep, the sound of rustling leaves seemed louder, a sharp contrast to the otherwise quiet surroundings. When I finally approached him, the president didn't immediately notice me. He was engrossed in whatever task he was performing on the porch, unaware that I was standing just feet away. I took a deep breath, and with my voice shaking but determined, I called out, "What are you doing here?" The words felt heavy, more like an accusation than a question. And as soon as I spoke, his body stiffened. He turned, his eyes wide in surprise. clearly startled by my sudden appearance. His face was an unreadable mask. And for a moment, neither of us said anything. We just stood there, the weight of the situation sinking in. He quickly tried to compose himself, but I could see the uncertainty in his eyes. I didn't expect anyone to show up," he said, his voice strained, almost too calm for someone who had been caught off guard. "I came here for a bit of peace, to get away from everything." But his words didn't sit well with me. It wasn't just that he was here, something felt off. Why had he chosen this place? And why had he been so secretive about it? The more I thought about it, the angrier I became. "What do you mean, get away?" I demanded, stepping forward. "This is my property. You have no right to be here. What's really going on?" The president shifted uncomfortably under my gaze, his posture stiffening. He seemed to search for the right words, but none came easily. After a long pause, he finally said, "I didn't think it would cause any harm. I've been coming here for a while now. I needed to clear my head." His words didn't make sense. It was clear he was hiding something. The cabin, though abandoned, was still part of my family's legacy. I couldn't just let him trespass without an explanation. I could feel the anger rising, and in that moment, I knew this wouldn't just be an ordinary conversation. There was more at stake here than a simple misunderstanding, and I wasn't about to let him leave without revealing the truth. The tension between us thickened, and I stood my ground, ready. I couldn't let him off the hook that easily. His attempt to brush off his trespassing with excuses about seeking peace didn't sit right with me. My mind raced with questions. Why had he been using the cabin as a getaway? And what else might he be hiding? The more I thought about it, the more I realized that I wasn't just going to let him walk away and pretend nothing had happened. He had invaded my space, and I needed to make sure he understood the consequences of his actions. As the realization set in, I made a snap decision. I wasn't going to let him just walk away. Not after what I discovered. The cabin wasn't some secret hideaway for him to escape to, and I wasn't about to let it become his sanctuary. The frustration boiled over inside me as I marched to the front door. I slammed it shut, and the sound of the wooden door hitting its frame seemed to echo through the stillness of the forest. I had blocked his way out, leaving him trapped. His eyes widened in disbelief as I turned to face him. "What do you think you're redoing?" he asked, his voice tinged with irritation, but there was also a hint of fear underneath. It was clear he hadn't expected me to take such drastic action. "I am not letting you leave until you tell me exactly what's going on," I said, my voice firm. His face shifted, the calm facade crumbling for just a moment. Before he regained his composure, he stood there, fidgeting, unsure of how to respond. The seconds stretched into an uncomfortable silence as I stared him down, unwilling to back down. "You have a lot of explaining to do. You don't just show up at my family's cabin and think you can walk away without anyone noticing." The pressure in the air was palpable as I stood there, blocking his only exit. He could feel the weight of the situation, and I could see his mind racing as he tried to figure out his next move. Would he try to talk his way out of it? Or was he going to take responsibility for his actions? I wasn't about to make it easy for him. My decision to block his exit was deliberate. I needed him to understand that there were consequences to his actions, and I wasn't going to let him slip away without facing those consequences head on. The standoff was only just beginning. The standoff felt like it had dragged on forever, though in reality, it had only been a few minutes. Still, the weight of the situation was enough to make time feel like it was standing still. The air between us was thick with tension, and the silence felt suffocating. I stood there, blocking his way out of the cabin, my stance unwavering as I waited for him to break the silence and give me the answers I demanded. He had been caught, and he knew it. Now it was time to face the consequences. After what seemed like an eternity, the HOA president finally spoke. His voice was softer now, stripped of the arrogance and bravado that had marked his earlier words. "Look, I never meant for this to happen," he began, his eyes avoiding mine. "I've been coming here for months, but it wasn't what you think. I needed a place to get away from the pressure of everything the HOA. My job. Everything. The stress was too much." His explanation barely scratched the surface of the questions I had. What did the HOA have to do with any of this? Why had he chosen my cabin of all places? And why had he kept it a secret? The answer still didn't make sense. And I couldn't shake the feeling that there was something he wasn't telling me. The weight of his position as HOA president only made this more complicated. If he had access to my property without my knowledge, what else was he capable of? The unease in the pit of my stomach grew heavier as I realized that his presence here wasn't a simple case of trespassing, it was a violation of trust. As I stood there, blocking the only exit, I couldn't help but wonder if this was part of a larger scheme. One that involved, if you're shocked by this story, make sure to hit that subscribe button. You won't want to miss what happens next. Stay tuned for more unbelievable revelations.